Grade 12 to part 2 of legislation. In this video, we're going to look at the last 4 acts of legislation. Number 5 is the basic conditions of employment. When you see this act in the exam, basic conditions of employment, you must think of provisions, because this act is divided into provisions. And there are 4 provisions. You have to memorize these for your exam. There are provisions for work time, provisions for leave, provisions for employment details and remuneration, provisions of employment. But for the purposes of the short questions, we will only look at number 1, provisions for work time. So employees should get 1 hour for lunch. 1 hour is the same as 60 minutes. So employees should work for 9 hours a day, which is the same as 45 hours per week. If employees are going to work for more than 9 hours per day, that's overtime. That overtime should not be more than 3 hours per day. And if an employee is working overtime, they need to get an extra 50% for each overtime hour. Now, employees who work on Sundays and on public holidays should get double pay. Number 6, the 6th act is the compensation for occupational injuries and diseases. So if you contract an illness at work or you get injured at work, you will get compensation. Remember, compensation refers to a money award. So you'll be compensated if you contract an illness at work or you get injured at work. So what's the purpose of this act? So the purpose of this act is to provide compensation to employees who get injured or contract illnesses while they are at work. But also, the act also provides compensation to families of employees who die while they are at work. Right? This happens a lot in the mining industry. Some of those mine workers will die underground. So then the fund will provide compensation to their families. All right, the last point is important. Who pays towards the compensation fund? It's actually the business. The employer must pay a monthly fee to the compensation fund. And this monthly fee will depend on how many employees work for the business and the level of risk they face. So how risky the job is. Okay, so how can businesses comply with the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act? What should businesses do on their side? So businesses, remember we said it's the business that contributes to the compensation fund. So businesses should pay the monthly fee to the compensation fund, right? That is the job of the business. Businesses, number 2, should also assist employees who need to claim. So maybe businesses can assist these employees with the claim process, with their claim forms, and so forth. Number 3, businesses must keep accurate records of employees' details and income for at least 4 years. Right? These details will be needed in case the employees need to claim. All right, let's come to the 7th act, the National Credit Act. Key word here being credit. This act is all about credit. So this act provides credit information to both creditors, these are lenders, and to consumers. All right, consumers have rights according to the National Credit Act. And what are these rights in terms of credit? Consumers have the right to apply for credit and not get discriminated against. Number 2, consumers have a right to be given a reason if their credit application is being refused. They must get a reason or reasons why their credit application is being refused, if it is refused. Lastly, consumers should be able to access their credit information. So they must have access to their credit information and credit records. Why is the National Credit Act important? So the National Credit Act is important because it protects both. It provides information to both the creditors, the lenders, and to the consumers. So how are businesses protected by this act? Remember, as a business, you can go check before you give someone a loan. You can go check their credit record on NCR. Because of this act, you'll be able to see uh, information on this customer. So you'll be able to see the risky non-paying consumers, right? So the businesses can benefit, but consumers also benefit from the Credit Act because they consumers can also get information to see if a particular lender or creditor is registered, and they will also be able to be protected from those creditors who charge high interest rates like loan sharks. So the National Credit Act will benefit both creditors and consumers. All right, let's go now to the final act, the Consumer Protection Act. I think if you look at the title, it's pretty straightforward. This act is all about protecting the consumers from exploitation. All right, and again, we look at the rights of the consumers. Do not confuse these rights with the rights in terms of the National Credit Act. These are the rights of the consumer according to the Consumer Protection Act. All right. So, what are these rights? Consumers have the right to choose which goods and services to buy. So, you can choose what you want to buy. No one should force you. Number two, consumers have a right to get all the information about the goods and services that they wish to buy. Consumers also have the right to buy goods and services at the right of the right quality at the fair price. Right, so when you buy something, it should be of the right quality, and it shouldn't be too overpriced or overpriced. All right, so those are the three rights according to the Consumer Protection Act. It's very important that you don't confuse the consumer rights in the Consumer Protection Act with the consumer rights in the National Credit Act. Here these are the rights of consumers in terms of goods and services that they buy. Right, you see that all the sentences, the rights of the consumers according to the goods and services that they need to buy. So when you look at the Consumer Protection Act, you are looking at the right of consumers in terms of goods and services that they need to buy. But if we go back to the National Credit Act, now the rights of the consumers are as stipulated in the National Credit Act. These are the rights of the consumers in terms of credit, you see, in terms of credit. So the two are different. Don't get them confused in the exam. National Credit Act is looking at the rights of the consumers in terms of credit. So we said, number one, consumers have the right to apply for credit and not get discriminated against. Number two, we said consumers have a right to be given a reason if their credit application is being refused. And the last one was we said that consumers have a right to get their credit information and credit records. So according to the National Credit Act, those are the rights of the consumers. But if we now go to the Consumer Protection Act, now we're talking about the rights of the consumers in terms of goods and services. Number one, consumers have a right to choose which goods and services to buy. Consumers have the right to get all the information about the goods and services that they're going to buy. Lastly, consumers have a right to buy goods and services of the right quality and at the right price, at the fair price. All right, the last slide that we're going to look at. So what should businesses do to comply with the Consumer Protection Act? Again, here when we talk of the Consumer Protection Act, we are focused more on the goods and services that consumers need to buy. So from the business side, businesses need to display prices on all goods and services that they are selling. So consumers should be able to see the price, how much an item costs. Secondly, Businesses should display information of the ingredients used to make a product. And you'll find that uh, if you go to a supermarket and you look at any item, at the back of the item, there will be ingredients provided. And this is what businesses need to do. Finally, businesses need to provide measures for consumers to complain if they are not happy. So that you should be able to complain as a consumer if you're not happy about the product. Maybe you'll have access on the website, or you can contact that company. But consumers should be able to complain. So the businesses must make this possible. All right. That's the end of legislation. Thank you, Great House.